Hello everybody and welcome into my latest live video. Today it is the 6th of September 2023. It's Wednesday. My name is CareyHolzman and I am a working computer technician. I've been working in this industry professionally since 1991 and I'm here to share with you my experience. Now, when I share with you my experience, that doesn't mean that you have to do things the way I do them. It also doesn't mean I have to do things the way you do them. I do things according to, well, what gets me paid and what makes sure my customers stay happy and don't require constant visits with regards to follow-ups when things aren't done right and dealing with upset customers. So I just want you to know that this is me sharing my experience, and you may take from that what you will and leave the rest. My thanks to everybody who's joined us early, and my phone has been beeping like crazy since we started the show, and it's almost like somebody was waiting to drop off a package at the door. So bear with me for just 1 second because, oh, if I'd have known that, I would have delayed the broadcast by another minute or so. Hang in there. Yeah, okay, so that was, I think that's a screen I ordered for the other build we're doing. Okay, so these videos, if it's not obvious to you, they're all done live, unrehearsed and unscripted, and that's so I can interact with you. I don't know what YouTube channels you watch, but I'm not familiar with many, I can't think of one actually, that interacts with their audience on all videos. And that's primarily what we do here, unless I'm re-uploading some older content. But even that older content has a recording of me interacting with people at the time it was made. So you make this video as enjoyable as you want to make it. If you want to sit and just watch and you don't want to participate, if you just want to spectate, I promise you, the video won't seem as enjoyable to spectators as it does for those who interact with us. Join us in our chat room. It's completely free. You must be a subscriber, literally, for any length of time. Literally. You say that one more time. As soon as you hit the subscribe button, you are qualified to jump into our chat room. And we'd love to see you in there as long as you're a friendly person. Our chat room and our community is made up of nothing but friendly people. All ages, all genders, all nationalities, all religions. One thing they all have in common, none of them are jerks. If you're a jerk, you're not welcome here. Other than that, everybody else is very welcome here. We would love to have you in our chat room, as long as you're not a jerk. A shout out and a thank you to Paul O'Brien, who sent an Amazon gift card yesterday, during yesterday's replay, and sent another Amazon gift card just prior to the show starting today. Thank you to Paul O'Brien, joining us from Ireland. And I see $20 just came in from Gregory Howard, who says, hello, Carey. Hey, Gregory, thank you so much for your continued support. And a super chat from Paul O'Brien as well as that Amazon gift card. All right, so the folks over at Be Quiet, been working with the folks at Be Quiet in a very informal way. They let me know if I'm interested in some product, typically coolers, power supplies, fans, cases. They ask me if I'm interested to review it. In exchange, they'll send me the unit free of charge, but there's no contracts, there's no exchange of money. And sometimes I've been critical of some of the things Be Quiet does, and yet they seem, unlike other companies that get offended by that, Be Quiet seems to appreciate my candor and my honesty. And it's not meant to demean, it's only meant to help the design, or it's meant to help me understand something that doesn't make any sense to me if it's supposed to make sense. And despite that, they continue offering me things to review, and I appreciate them very much. I appreciate any company that's willing to take some criticism with suggestions for improvement. Now, that doesn't go across the board for all their products. I'm just thinking of like situations in the past where I have been more critical of certain products than others. Now, when it comes to Be Quiet's cases, they're second to none in quality. And in this particular case, literally and figuratively, we've got something that I could probably stand and jump on and it wouldn't bow or damage the case. This is a monster. The good side about having a big case is obviously you can put a lot of stuff in it. You're not too limited. I don't think you're limited at all with the kind of liquid cooling you want to put in there. I think this thing will hold up to 8 2.5-inch hard drives or 4 3.5-inch drives along with 4 2.5-inch drives. See, because the 3.5-inch drives can also hold 2.5. So total of 8 2.5s or 4 of each. There's also has plenty of room, as I mentioned, for liquid cooling, giant radiators, super easy to work in. It's a very deep case. So when it comes to cable management, you've got this big space back here that you can put your cables behind and not have to worry about struggling to get that back panel on because of your cables sticking out. Be Quiet's also got the power supply shroud down there. And they make 3 different versions of this case. This is the Shadow Base 800DX. And the link for it is in the video description below the video that'll take you right to Be Quiet's website. Be Quiet also has an overview video they produced. And if you want to watch that, that is also in the video description below this video. The downside of a case this big is it is heavy. It's made of pretty thick gauge steel from the way it feels. And I imagine that is not aluminum. That is going to be, see, a magnet will stick to that. Yeah, that is, that's steel. So it's heavy, it's built strong, it's very roomy, and it would cost a bundle to ship it. So when I'm done building this computer, my intention is to sell it locally because this is a $180 computer case. I think it's $180. And it would cost me $180 just to ship it. So your advantage of buying from manufacturers directly or from Newegg, Amazon, other retailers that sell this case, maybe B&H Photo, so they often have their own shipping as Amazon does, or they make such deals with shippers because they ship so much, it costs them nothing or little to nothing. They throw the shipping in for free. In that instance, it's a much better deal for you to buy this case online than to purchase it locally, in my opinion. That being said, what I want to do today is build in this case to see what it's like to build in. Usually cases that are this large are very, very easy to build in. You don't have to worry about cooler depth. If you want to put one of those Noctua DH15 monster air coolers, this is pretty much any air cooler that exists for the most part is going to fit in here without a problem. This thing is big. It's not too big, but it is big. It's got some nice subtle RGB accents that run along the sides here, and you'll see over here on the other side. So it does have some RGB, but it's not over the top in your face. Furthermore, they do make a version of this case without any RGB at all for those of us who want a business class machine. In fact, I think the other version may also have a solid panel rather than a glass panel. I'd have to double check that. And then beyond that, they make the same case in white. Now, as you can see with this case, we've got a rear fan back here and a single front fan right there in the middle. Some of the configurations, the cases will come with 3 fans. Be Quiet is very well known for the quietness of their fans. Now, I've got a motherboard here that I prepped a while back, and this is a 10900K on an ASRock Z590 Extreme Wi-Fi 6E motherboard. So this is a giant motherboard, and it's going to require a pretty big case. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe that Mugen 5 cooler I put on it isn't ideal for real stressful, resource-intensive tasks that you might ask a motherboard of this caliber to do. So what I might end up doing after we get the motherboard installed is I'm going to reach out to Be Quiet, see if they want to If they want to, they can send us a liquid cooler that they make along with a power supply that they make, and we'll make this an entire Be Quiet build. But for today, we're going to use what I have, and I don't have any Be Quiet power supplies or coolers, so we'll go ahead and stick with this cooler for now, get an idea what it looks like. I don't know how much RAM I put on here, but that's subject to change. And yeah, this board, this is a big motherboard. It's got the IO shield on it. And if you look in my YouTube history, you will find a video. I think Mitch and I prepped this together, and then it got put away to be put into a case later. But a motherboard like this, you know, this is a fully loaded board. It's a full-size ATX board with Wi-Fi. It's really an ideal candidate for a case of this size. So I thought these two are a match made in heaven. So for today, that's what we'll do. And then follow up with Be Quiet will probably lead to revisiting this to swap out the power supply for a Be Quiet power supply, and the Mugen 5 we swap out for a 360 degree all-in-one, 360 millimeter rather, all-in-one liquid cooler would be my preference. And then we'll have everything basically be a Be Quiet system. Now, adding the cooler is going to add a lot of weight, as well as all the other components. This case is only going to get heavier. So it's very impractical for me to ship this to anybody. But if somebody's in the local Phoenix area or willing to drive out to get it, you're interested in purchasing it, reach out to me privately and see if we can't make a deal. But in the meantime, we're here to really look at the pros, potential cons, and more of an in-depth look of what this case offers, and get an overview of, is it easy to build in? Is it difficult to build in? What's ideal? What could be better? That's what we're going to find out today. Or at least that's our intention. Rice Star Man contributes $10 in Super Chat. He says, wow, that looks like a good build. I'm sorry to miss it. I'm on vacation. Hey, enjoy your vacation. Hello to all my friends in blue. Matt's Olaf joining us. Ben Laird joining us. Gary Tatum. Sue Cool Lawrence joining us. As well as Captain Blinsky, Jeff H., John Paul Bacon, AJ Haverkamp. I see John Famlor and Douglas Burchell, David Martinez, David Bauer, John Williams, Pete Unwin, Joseph Venturi, Paul Howe, Mark Gaines, Mark Baggett, Andy Kane, Ron Varnish, Don Parada, R2 Rasinin, Robert McCord Magumi, and many, many more that I can mention right now. But thank you guys for joining me. Now, I guess the first thing is we'll give it the old 360. So there's your glass panel. That box in there is going to contain all of the screws and mounting hardware for installing all of the components in the case. As we roll around back, you'll see we've got our rear I/O fan. We've got our I/O port there. It looks like we have some vertical slots for the option of getting a video riser cable and turning the video vertically. That looks like an option here. I've never done that before, but certainly appears to have that. And then below, area for our power supply. And coming around the other side, obviously no window on this side. That's where we're going to hide our cabling. So let's take a look and back around to the front. Now, typically cases that are this big have some pretty good filters on them. Anywhere there's a fan that's going to inhale air, we want to filter that air. If it's exhausting air, such as a rear case fan should be exhausting air, we don't put a filter on exhausting air. That's going out of the case. We want to filter what's coming in. So if I look up here at the top of the case, I can tilt this towards you, but we have a giant filter up here. Now, this is assuming you're going to have fans drawing air in. If you're going to have air exhausted out the top, you would want to remove this filter because this will restrict your airflow. And this appears to have, well, you'll get an idea of the scope of the size by simply looking at this area between this first line and the edge. That's your standard radiator length. So that's how much extra space you've got there. The filter is magnetic, so nothing to frustrate frustrate you to get it off or put it back on. It's very simple. Typically, we have filters on the bottom by the power supply, which I'm feeling for, and my camera's going a little crazy with this case. So I am going to, I think, lock the focus so it'll stop doing that. Let me see if I can figure out how I can lock the focus on this camera. Let's see, profile, white balance, iris, shutter speed. Bear with me for a second here. I think should be a slot here in the menu, an option. White balance, gain, zoom, focus area. I'm sure there's a button here somewhere to just temporarily disable autofocus. Ah, found it. It's right up by the lens. Let's see. Which way does that switch move? Oh, it pushes in. Push that in. Focus position is there. Okay. You guys let me know if that's not in focus, because I'm turning off autofocus is now off. So wherever it's locked in right now is hopefully in focus. Now, as I spin this around, we shouldn't deal with that focus correction. So as I was talking about, filter down below by the power supply, and then also at the front of the case, they really intend for this to have 3 fans up front. Now, that's not that important unless you have a modern graphics card or, a high-end graphics card. But the idea is that you can just pull the cover right off, just like so. And then we have right here a magnetic dust cover. You'll see it's got some tabs on that side. So those tabs would go in the slot first. And then once you align that, close it like a door, and it locks in. These electronic pads right here are what give voltage to the LEDs that light up the edges of the front panel. And of course, this is how easy it is to get access to the front if you wanted to put a radiator in there, or you wanted to put a push-pull configuration for your radiator. All those options and more are available. And it's all 140 millimeter fans from the looks of things. Looks like it could be 120 or 140. So, I mean, obviously you'd want 140. You're going to move more air with a 140 than a 120. So therefore, the fan wouldn't need to spin as fast, and therefore would be quieter. So let's just leave all this off for right now, but that was super easy to get into. As for the I/O, we have USB Type-C up here. We have 2 USB Type-A's. Now those are not blue, but one would assume they're USB 3 anyway. Power button, microphone input, headphone output. And this button right here is not a reset switch. This will control your RGB lighting manually. But this is ARGB, so if you have a motherboard that supports ARGB, you can hook it up to that. And I think there's an RGB fan controller behind here, but we'll have to look at that together. I've done really no prep work or rehearsal for this. I haven't even so much as looked at the user manual, so we'll discover this together. Now, removing the side panels looks pretty straightforward. We've got 4 thumb screws, which is pretty standard in most cases these days. One at the top. Oh, and they are captive screws, so you don't have to worry about misplacing them. Pull this panel back towards me. Sure, I've got it completely unscrewed. There it goes. Tight fit. We have sound dampening foam inside of here. Be quiet, it's not just a name, it's a mission. And we have quite a bit of depth here for that cable management I was telling you about, so that we can run a ton of cables, which you often have to do with RGB, and not have to struggle to get that rear case panel back on, like trying to close an overfilled suitcase. This is always a welcome addition in my world. Here, we've got some kind of a knockout. It looks like you can put a 2.5-inch drive here and a 2.5-inch drive there. This whole bottom area is empty. I do not see a 3.5-inch hard drive cage. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's welcome. However, where would you put a 3.5-inch drive? I guess I got to remove this glass panel and get a better look. Now, for me personally, the only thing I'm using mechanical drives in now are network attached storage devices. I don't put them in desktops anymore. That is a heavy, thick piece of glass. That has got to make up at least a quarter of the weight of this entire case. Holy cow. Have you ever picked up one of the tempered glass shelves of your refrigerator and felt how heavy it is? This is heavier than that. Holy cow, that is heavy. All right, so taking a look inside, we've got this. This is this piece is designed to hide cabling. And from the looks of it, it looks like this piece can slide left or right to accommodate a larger motherboard, which is a nice touch. We've got this vent down here. And this vent, you can see the way it's pointed, it's meant to blow air up at where a graphics card would be. And it's removable in case you wanted to stick a giant, I don't know, liquid cooling, something liquid cooling related. I mean, you still have quite a bit of space here for a radiator and a fan, but you could remove that if you needed more space. That's a nice touch. Of course, our box of accessories here, that's the mounting hardware. We've got pre-installed standoffs in all the standard positions, the 9 standard positions. And with regards to mechanical drives, we've got a fan up here, fan here, and a fan here. So we've got 340 millimeter fans. And it's quite possible that I was looking at a different model when I saw the specs that said 4 3.5-inch drives and 4 2.5-inch. I see 2 2.5-inch drives can go there. Again, no tray here. Looks like a tray could go there. There is a riser here. And 2 2.5-inch drives could go right here. This piece, we turn this thumb screw, this piece comes out. And that's got our accessories on it. All right, so I'll put the accessories box down here. And we'll leave that little piece over there. Just kind of strip this thing down so we get a good eye full here. Got a SATA cable for powering RGB lighting. Then we got our typical front port umbilicals that includes a USB 3 header. So those 2 USB ports that are black up front are USB 3. What version of USB 3 depends on the motherboard you're plugging this into. We've got power switch and power LED. There is no hard drive LED and there is no hard drive, no reset switch, no hard drive LED. So only the two cables instead of the typical 4. We have our ARGB header that would plug into a controller or motherboard. Some versions of this case come with an RGB fan controller. This one does not. So they, like I said, they make about 3 different versions in 2 different colors for a total of 6 variations. Some of which, there's one that comes with 3 fans and the fan controller. I guess if you have the 3 fans, you'd get the fan controller. We don't get the fan controller because we only have the one plus that one up there in the rear. So that doesn't require a controller. Any motherboard should easily accommodate 3 fans. And then we have a USB 3.1 header for the USB Type-C port up front, assuming your motherboard will support that. If not, you won't use it. It'll just be a dead port. We've got our full 7 PCIe slots, which is standard for an ATX motherboard. Our power supply looks like we can mount it into the frame outside of the case. Once again, screws are being held captive, so we can do this outside of the case where it's less confining. Attach the power supply and then slide this in and lock it down. Power supply shroud, I believe, is not removable. Looks like it's riveted in. All right, so this appears, the 800DX appears to be lean in the sense that they're not giving you a lot of extra items you might get with the other models that have the overabundance of fans and the ability to add a bunch of drives. This one is not going to give you any, as far as I can tell, I don't see any 3.5-inch drive storage on this, which again, for me personally, good riddance. But they do sell a different model of this, the Shadow Base 800, not the DX line, that would have that hard drive cage if you need it. And that would hold 4 3.5-inch drives. But we can hold the 4 2.5-inch drives, 1, 2, 3, and 4. For me, I'm all about M.2 NVMe drives. And as I mentioned, I would use a network attached storage or a USB attached drive if I want mechanical for larger capacity. If you're wanting a mechanical drive, you don't want the DX version of this case, just so you know. And they make the non-DX version of the case in both with RGB and without RGB, so it can really cover just about anybody's wish list for somebody who wants a large, well-built case with a lot of room for cooling and I think a 485 millimeter length graphics card. Is it 485? Ridiculously huge. Big. I don't think there's a graphics card made that will not fit in here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure every graphics card ever made for the home consumer is going to fit in there. Easy. Like snug. Not even snug. I was going to say snug like a bug in a rug, but no. I think it's going to fit in there loose. It's going to have lots of room around it. It will not be tight or confined in any way. So this case is both tall, wide, and deep. I guess wide and deep is kind of the same thing. I think of wide as the outside and deep as the inside. Now this motherboard does have this motherboard here has a secondary motherboard point right here, which is not common on ATX boards. So what I will need to do is just add one more standoff because this board's going to take 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screws to secure it. Whereas most full-size ATX take 9, but every once in a while, typically that mounting point right there is typically only used on micro ATX boards. But apparently the folks over at ASRock decided to give it a little more rigidity, secure to the case by adding that extra hole. You don't have to use it, by the way. 9 screws is plenty. I would fill the hole with something, a plastic standoff, or if I'm building the machine and I've got the standoff, why not just use it? Gregory Howard says this case has a lot of options. It does have a lot of options as long as one of the options you need isn't small. So the bigger it is, the more you have to work with. Avery Ramstorff has renewed his support as a member here now for 5 months. Thank you, Avery. He says his mother's out of the hospital. Well, that's awesome. Geo thinks the case needs a 3.5-inch cage. I think you mean 3.5. So here's the thing. This is sold with a 3.5-inch cage. This is the version that doesn't come with it. You do understand that. I am making my point clear. Not everybody wants a 3.5-inch. I don't. So this case does not need that. When they already sell the same case with that, you're looking at the wrong product. If you think this case needs a 3.5-inch cage, you need to look at the other Shadow Base 800 case. That one has what you're looking for. If this one had that, then there'd be no difference between them, right? So in order to differentiate and offer people a variety and choice, this is the version that does not come with the cage. But rest assured, they do make a version with the cage. And Geodis Grammatopoulos says, I think the 3.5-inch drive cage is in the box. In this box right here, you think there's a 3.5-inch drive cage in this thin little box? It'd be the thinnest drive cage I've ever seen. Let's see what's in the accessories box, speaking of which. Well, it does appear this slide could hold one 3.5-inch drive. Certainly not 4. And where would this go? So apparently you can, I want to stand corrected here. These are live and unrehearsed. Stand corrected here. It does come with, you are correct, it does come with a 3.5-inch drive cage, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen before, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I'm just trying to look around to see if it's obvious where this goes. Otherwise, I have to open the manual and read it. I want to say that the other version, the non-DX version of this case, will hold 4 3.5-inch drives. So it's good to know that they do have you covered for one anyway. Let's take a look at the user manual and see where that would install, because it's not obvious. As a working computer technician in this industry professionally since 1991, for the most cases, service field techs are thrown into whatever you get thrown into. You hit the ground running and you got to just deal with it. So I like to take a look and see what's obvious. And if anything isn't obvious, I think that's a sign to the engineers that maybe they could do a little more to make it appear more intuitive so that one does not have to read the instruction manual. When you don't have to read an instruction manual, that's a sign of excellent engineering. That's all I'm saying. Now, with regards to that drive cage, where would that go? Oh, it's really not a cage, it's a bracket. And it appears that the bracket would go... There's a lot of pictures in here, not a lot of words. That's a sign of a good engineering design if you don't have to be real wordy in the explanation. This shows maybe I'm looking at this wrong. This looks like, it's very unusual. I've not seen another case like this to compare it with, but it looks like maybe me step around the other side. Let's take a look at this. I see a bunch of holes here. And I see a bunch of holes down here. So I'm wondering, I think it would have to go this way. Yeah. All right. So that doesn't work the way I thought it did. When I took this out, this looked like a hard drive tray, but clearly it's not a tray at all. This will give you the ability then, from all appearances, to install. Oh, wait a minute. How would that work? I'm confused how this works. As I mentioned, I've been in the field doing computer repair, upgrades, builds since 1991. But never in my career have I seen anything like this. So I'll give kudos to Be Quiet for this original idea. However, it is definitely not intuitive on how this is supposed to work, because of this piece, it's got little notches here, and then there are little tabs that stick out, and those tabs would go into the cutouts. I guess that keeps this from sliding left or right. And then you can move this tray either to this position or this position to my right. But then how do you put drives in it? That in and of itself will not hold drives. So there's got to be more to it than just that piece. It looks like there's supposed to be a sled that slides in here, but I don't recall getting any sleds. That's just screws and zip ties. And I think the case box is completely empty, but let me just double check that we didn't leave anything behind. No, this box is completely empty. Huh. But what good would this do anybody without the sleds that go in it? I'm confused why they would include this if it requires another part to be usable. The instruction manual in this is very, very good. Lots of good pictures, even highlighting where screws would go, which they've highlighted circles here. Because I have autofocus off now, I have to pull this further away from the camera. This shows another box. We didn't get another box. It shows a box that looks like that. That would contain, presumably, the those drive sleds. Methinks. Shows this pops out for cable management. If you were to put two 2.5-inch drives, the idea would be that you'd have their cables meet here in the middle and punch this out and run the cables through. The SATA drive installation is pretty unique. It looks like you'll put some screws in that come in that accessories box into the drive, and then the drive will pop in to the carrier. It drops in like a keyhole slot. Interesting. It also shows it's got to be 2.5-inch installation of hard drives on the bracket. This shows hard drives mounting on this bracket here, which I assumed is for 2.5-inch drives only. But no, this will also hold two 3.5-inch drives. And the documentation kind of shows it right there, how the drives install. Yeah, that didn't work the way I thought it would at all. Okay, so that would be two 3.5-inch, and then presumably this would be the other two. So there is room for four 3.5-inch mechanical drives after all, though I am still lost with regards to where how the mechanical drives would attach to that piece. Which again, I'm not going to use any mechanical drives, but I'm just curious in theory how that would work. Apparently the accessories box they're showing, even though it looks long and elongated compared to what we got, is the accessory box they're referring to get these little screws. So these are proprietary screws that are necessary for the drive mounting in this unique way. So, okay, some out of the box thinking there from the folks at Be Quiet. I get it. What I don't get is how the heck you're supposed to use this cage. Once again, if the cage goes here, then what's going to support the drive that we put in there? Can't believe it doesn't seem to be anything to secure the drive. There does appear to be some kind of a drive cage that would go in here and lock down. But maybe there's still something I'm missing. Probably. It does show a drive being put in there, but it doesn't really explain if that drive is in a sled or not, or what is holding the drive in. Now, of course, you can go to Be Quiet's link in the video description and pull up this manual in PDF form if you want to follow along with me or see if you can interpret it, because I'm lost. We would obviously secure this with these two screws and two screws down here, and that just gives us this, which is doing nothing to secure a drive, and I don't see any other support material, you know, like a drive sled, unless let's take another look at the accessories box. Accessories box is empty. Huh. My guess is the sleds are sold separately because they would be pretty big. I don't know how I could miss them if they were included. So this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you don't include the sleds that are required for this, why include this? This is adding confusion, like trying to figure out how to use this. And if you haven't included everything I needed to complete the installation of this to properly use it, it certainly leaves me a bit dumbfounded and confused as to whether or not I'm understanding this correctly. Michael Dane has been a member now for 8 months. Right on. Thank you, Michael. You're the man. He says, greetings, Carey and chat. Yeah, I think you might have to purchase the drive sled separately. That's what it appears. But in my opinion, they should not have included this. In my opinion, they should include this with the drive sled. You should get this and 2 drive sleds. It should be a kit. I see there is an accessory for sale on Be Quiet's site that is the drive cage, and that's presented to us from Paul Howe. So if you see the link in the chat room from Paul Howe, that'll take you to the Be Quiet page where they sell the drive cages. So this is useless to us without that, best I can tell. And I'll verify with Be Quiet after the video that they've included a part we can't use unless we buy optional accessories. So to me, this would be an optional accessory. It should not be included. It's not functional without the purchase of other hardware, then that should come with the purchase of the other hardware. Doesn't make any sense. That's bizarre to me. R2 Rasenin also posts a link as well to Be Quiet. It's the same link that Paul Howe has posted. I guess Arto got there first, but interesting. Happy birthday to our good friend John Jack Wilson. Everybody say happy birthday, John Wilson. He's turning 79 years young today. Right on. Just looking through your chats before I start to build. I want to understand what I'm building in. I want to make sure I'm not blocking anything I might potentially need in the future. So I want an understanding more or less of how all these brackets go in, what they're for, what we're going to use, what we're not going to use. Mark Gaines contributes £5. He says, Carey, did you receive my Amazon gift card I sent before the stream? Oh, let me check, Mark. Let me check. Oh, I do see an Amazon gift card from Mark Gaines for $25. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for supporting the channel. Normally, when I get the gift cards, you should be getting responses. You might want to check your spam and your email if you have not gotten a response. But yes, Paul O'Brien and Mark Gaines both sent Amazon gift cards prior to the show starting. Thank you both. I'm sorry I I dropped the ball on that one, Mark. My apologies. Cheers. Thank you. All right. So I will clear this up, but this appears to be useless without optional accessories purchased. So again, in my opinion, this should come with the optional accessory box. This is just adding confusion. It should have some sticker on it that says, you know, you can't use this without, you know, and point me to a link to where I can buy it. Otherwise, I don't know what this is. And the documentation, you know, shows it in use, but it doesn't really describe how it's used or emphasize that anything additional would need to be purchased. You know, when you're spending nearly $200 on a case, likely $200 after sales tax, I wouldn't think I'd have to buy anything additional to that. So I want to give them a little dig for that. That doesn't affect the quality of the case or the value for what you get, although it kind of affects the value in the sense that you've already paid this much. Now, if the case came with those, as I mentioned, I would not use them. They would just go to the customer and be an option for the customer to use. That's why you shouldn't have given me this at all, in my opinion. So again, I'm using only M.2 NVMe storage. That's all I've been using the last couple of years. The only time I use mechanical storage these days is in a network attached storage. That's pretty much it. These cases are designed to meet the individual wants, needs, and desires of each individual owner, to your budget, and to whatever you want to do. So I'm just explaining what I want to do. Robert Mortensen says the Sled 2 is sold separately. Yeah, that sucks. That sucks. I'm gonna flat out say it. I would rather been left in an ignorant bliss if you'd have just left this out of the case. Because now I got a part I can't use, and I better not lose. This should be sold separately. Okay. And that's it. The box is empty. There's nothing else in the box. Big old wire tie. Recycle that. When I wrap up wires, I can cut it. I could probably wrap about 4 cables. I'm cutting that 3 times. All right, let's see. Gordon wants to know if I've ever tried Scotland's national drink called Iron Brew. I did try that on video here on the channel. Yes. If you go back in my channel history, I don't know if you can search for it and find it, but yeah, we did a whole thing on trying some stuff from Scotland, and Iron Brew was one of those things. That was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Not my favorite, personally. I understand that Iron Brew outsells Coca-Cola as the #1 selling soda in Scotland. It used to say made from girders, and it used to be called Iron Brew, but because it's not made of iron and it isn't actually brewed, their version of the FDA said this, you can't market this. This is false marketing. So they changed the name to IRNBRU. Yeah, very familiar with it. All right, so I think what we'll do now is I'm going to lay the case flat, like so. This barely fits on this 22-inch Lazy Susan that I use. Just. John Wilson says he's got to run, but thank you all for the birthday wishes. You guys and gals rock. Right on, back at you. Back at you, Jack. Thanks for hanging out. Enjoy your birthday. I hope it's a great one. We got zip ties. We've got a variety of screws. And then we have these grommets and a little socket wrench for a Phillips screwdriver to basically convert to a 5mm socket. I use a real 5mm socket, so I don't use those. But it's nice to know that they're included, as I imagine most people do not have a 5mm socket, and that's necessary for loosening, tightening, or moving the motherboard standoffs. They're all 5mm. Let's see if there should be, I hope, another standoff in here. Holy cow, did they give us 8 extra standoffs? And are those for the motherboard? So these are the the screws with shoulders for the hard drives. We don't use those on today's build. These are our fine threaded standard screws you typically see on SSD installations or optical drive. They're typically used back in the day. That's what we used them on. This is your standard case screw. These are typically used for securing anything in your PCIe slots, as well as power supply. And finally, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 motherboard standoffs. I don't think these are motherboard standoffs. They look too shallow. What are these for? So the motherboard standoffs that the case comes with are a standard height. These are not that tall. So I wonder what these are used for. I don't expect Be Quiet to throw me a curveball on a computer case like this. I'd understand one sort of strange thing that's not obvious to me, but we're now on thing number 2 or 3 that defies custom. So let's see if what the description says. It says it's an M3. Oh, they want you to use these for, basically they're tiny thumb screws for 2.5-inch SSD installation. So they don't give us any spare motherboard standoffs at all? Really? Should give us at least 2 spare standoffs. They give us the standoff wrench. Well, that's disappointing, Be Quiet. First of all, it's disappointing you made the SSD screws look like motherboard standoffs, except they don't have a hole in the center. They're just a Phillips head on the top. So you obviously could not screw a motherboard down to these. They don't have a hole in the center. But boy, they sure do look like motherboard standoffs. That's very confusing. And I'm just double checking and triple checking that I'm not moving too quickly. No, they've not given us. Okay, so far as I can tell, they've given us a part we can't use without buying an accessory. And they shouldn't have, in my opinion. And they've kept us from extra motherboard standoffs, which they clearly have room for more standoffs, but there should be at least 2 additional motherboard standoffs. That's pretty standard for most case manufacturers. They've given us none. So what does that mean? It means that I cannot put the additional 10th screw down into this case, even though the case has room for it. It's fully capable, but without the standoff, I can't use it. Now, as I mentioned, that 10th screw isn't really necessary. I use it because it's there. The case can accommodate it. Why not? So instead, I'll use one of my little plastic or nylon motherboard spacers, which I am running out of. I need to remember to pick some more of these up from Studio A. Yeah, this looks like my last one there. And that just, even that does not have to be used. It's just there to give the motherboard a little more support. I don't want to question the motherboard manufacturer's reasoning behind why they added that extra support point. I just feel that, you know, Be Quiet is promoting this as sort of a luxury case. Large, accommodating, with a price to match. So then to try and nickel and dime me with drive cages after the sale, I feel is wrong. And to very stingily keep extra motherboard standoffs from being included, it baffles my mind, because there are other boards that take more than 9 screws. This is not that unique. And, you know, the ability that you can replace one if you stripped out the inside of one mistakenly. You've got no spares. You've got nothing to fall back on. Now, if this was a discounted case, some rock bottom thing, you know, that you'd buy at the dollar store, it would be perfectly reasonable. But at this price point, I find it a little disheartening, because for whatever this cost, I'm sure you could have given me some motherboard standoffs that I could have used. This I'm not going to use unless I buy the drive cages separately. Once again, they sell a different version of this. If the 3.5-inch drive installation is important to you, buy the other models they have of this that are equipped as such. If this isn't equipped with it, then it shouldn't have been equipped with that either. That's my opinion. So I have a history with Be Quiet where I am constantly critical of some of the things that they do that make no sense to me, that don't seem to have any good logical reasoning other than we do it because, just because. I'm hard pressed to find some logical, scientific reasoning behind some of their designs, where they're not necessarily easier to work on. They're not lighter. If anything, they're heavier. They are well built, I will say. And my criticism is in the design. It's not in the quality of the workmanship or the materials. It's a question of, are we just being, you know, are we just doing something because we can? Or is there a real useful, helpful reasoning behind why some design choices are made at Be Quiet? Be Quiet's done this over and over again, where they put power connectors vertically on the back of a power supply, modular power connectors, which make it near impossible to add another modular connector behind one that's already there that's blocking your view, especially when you've got a power supply shroud. You say, well, what's the advantage of putting those connectors vertically instead of horizontally the way most other power supply manufacturers do it? And I've never received a clear answer to that other than we want to be different. But being different where it makes the installation easier would make sense if there's some benefit to it. But if you're just being different with no benefit, it's frustrating, because it makes my job, and it'll make the job of anybody building it much, much more difficult if you've got to pull the power supply out in order to see where the cables plug in, because the other cables in front are blocking. You can't see what's behind it. If they were horizontal, it's much easier to look past them and above them and around them. So again, this is another example where it doesn't make any sense. I've seen where they've had power supplies. I think it was Be Quiet also had a power supply where the holes in the fan were really large and you could drop a screw down in it. And I asked specifically, you know, was this taken under consideration, why those holes would be so wide? Normally, the holes in the bottom of the power supply are narrow, specifically so nothing like a metal screw could fall down inside of it when you're building. And then you don't get it out, or you don't notice it, and you plug it in, it short circuits 120 volts or 240 volts in some countries. And that's going to be a big bang. So why? And typically it's a design choice. It has no thought or no conscious thought about safety or the logical reasoning why other manufacturers don't make those slots so wide. They just think, I guess it's just done for looks, but there's more to it than that. It's done for safety. I don't want to beat up on them too much, because I do like Be Quiet. I do like the quality of their products. But sometimes, and this is a case, literally a case, where they've done some design implementation that doesn't seem beneficial. So again, this is all my opinion as a computer technician and as a person who enjoys computers. I built tens of thousands of computers in my career. And as you can imagine, when you're just building one, little inconveniences of having to work around the power supply because the cables go on vertically, or delaying your build because you didn't realize you had to order hard drive sleds separately, really no big deal to any home user who cares. But when you need to get a number of computers done on a deadline with customers waiting, and now you're going to cause those customers a further delay as you need to get parts. And if another pandemic hits or anything interrupts distribution and inventory, I mean, your hands are tied. There's nothing you can do. So I am opposed to these kind of designs because it gives you no choice but to go back to the manufacturer for more. In my business, I make it a point that my customers don't sign contracts with me. When you buy a computer from me, I'm not a gym membership. You can open the computer, work on it yourself. You can take it somewhere else and have it worked on. My hope is that any future work that you need, you will voluntarily come back to me because you want to, not because I've got a proprietary design where you can't go anywhere else. I really don't like companies when they do that. So if this was going to have proprietary parts, such as those drive sleds, it should have included them. Because if anything happens to Be Quiet and they go out of business, or as I mentioned, any disruptions in manufacturing or distribution, you've got this big, beautiful case, and now you can't expand it. Your hands are tied indefinitely. And the only fast solution is to buy a different brand of case. Something to keep in mind. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pop this little standoff right here. And I want to remind you, I'm not picking on Be Quiet. I'm trying to help. I'm suggesting that Be Quiet consider these things when they're doing their case and power supply designs, because I feel like they're only considering a home user and they're not considering business. And look, if they don't want business clients that are going to order, 100 or 1,000 cases at a time, it's their right. Maybe they don't want that business. If all you want is one case sold to Joe in Montana, one case sold to Susan in Phoenix, maybe that's the kind of business they want. But if it was me, I'd want to sell as many cases as possible to both consumers and businesses. And I would make it so that everything you need to build your computer would be included with the case, with the exception of any custom cooling. Like, I don't mind the number of fans. That doesn't bother me. This one has 3 fans. They have other models that have 3 fans up front, plus the rear fan and the top fan. Whatever, like that's not a detriment to building, but not having the ability to mount the drives. Now, granted, you can mount 2, but if you were also trying to mount 2 2.5-inch drives or 4 2.5-inch drives, you would have to make a decision of what you'd have to sacrifice. On a case this big, at this price, you shouldn't have to make any sacrifices. That's what it amounts to. Now, let me just dry fit this board in here. See if we can get that to line up. Thanks. Our IO shield is already built into this board, and the Be Quiet case does have that center standoff that's a post that holds the motherboard in position for us, and I appreciate that. So while I'm quick to point out things that I think don't make any sense, I'm also equally praising things that are done well and do consider the builder to make it easier. Something like that can make building a lot easier. And once again, I've got to remind you, as a home user, you might build one computer every few years, maybe 2 in a year. For somebody who does this as a living, at one point I was building upwards of 5 to 8 computers a day. But they couldn't be like this, or I wouldn't be able to be that productive. My output would be down. Customers would wait longer. We would lose business from customers that are tired of waiting. And then the addition of having to order those cages separately could further put us behind when we're waiting for more accessories to arrive to complete a job. I want everything in the box. When I order a case, I should not have to order drive cages separately. Now, Be Quiet did have some cases that came with 1 or 2 drive cages, and then had slots to add up to 3 to 5 more, I think. And those were sold separately. That makes sense to me, because the vast majority of people building aren't going to put more than 2 drives in it. Nowadays, I think the vast majority of people are only using mechanical hard drives, those that still do, because they're left over and they don't want to part with them because they work. And as I mentioned, using the screws in this wonky system to more or less hang the drive off the back, you can mount two 3.5-inch drives. It's weird, but it'll work. But I would prefer to put my 2.5-inch drives there and use the drive cage for the 3.5-inch drive. But maybe that's because that's what I'm accustomed to. Maybe that's because that's what every case manufacturer has been doing since I started my career in 1991. The only one I've ever seen that does this is Be Quiet. And for the life of me, why they continue to do it, why they continue to inconvenience, potentially inconvenience the client is beyond my level of understanding. Not aware of any other case manufacturer that sells the hard drive sleds separately and doesn't include any. If you guys can name one outside of Be Quiet, I'd be very interested to know that, because it certainly feels to me, from my experience, I've never seen this except from Be Quiet, and it seems hard to justify. Like, what's a good reason for it? I can't find one. Let me look through your chats here. I'm not sure how old these comments are, but somebody is either way behind in the video and they're commenting about stuff we did 20 minutes ago, or, one of the best ways for you to know if you're watching current is to refresh your web page. Refresh the page that you're watching YouTube on, because you could be watching this video from 20 minutes ago. In fact, what I'm saying now may not even occur to the people watching in the past until 20 minutes from after I say it. It's a little frustrating sometimes. And it's the downside of putting the DVR mode on. Planet Cryos contributes $2. He says, it's me saying hi to you. Right on. Hello, Planet Cryos. Thank you for supporting the channel. Bill Garcia said he stopped using Be Quiet cases because they leave stuff out and they want to sell it separately. Bull142 said he received a package today. Well, hopefully the computer that he ordered, it arrives without any damage. Okay, so in any event, let me go ahead and secure this motherboard down, which I'm going to assume is going to be the fine threaded screws and not these big case screws. Could be either one. Some motherboard, some case manufacturers will use the coarse thread screws and some will use the fine. Fine is typically what's used. Or they use these really short coarse threaded ones, but they didn't give us any short ones. I just find it really bizarre. They gave us a 5mm socket without any 5mm standoffs other than what's pre-installed. What's the point? I guess just to move them around. But what if you don't have enough? Strange. It's just strange. Let's see, how many of these little fine threaded screws did they give us? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, we need 9, but the middle standoff is a post, which would subtract 1, so then we'd need 8. So it looks like they're not giving us any extras. It looks like 8 motherboard standoffs. 8 motherboard standoff screws. No extra screws, no extra standoffs. For as inexpensive as screws and standoffs are, and at the level that this case is at, it doesn't make any sense to me. But for our intents and purposes, using that nylon standoff, we should be able to have everything we need and Nothing left over in that regard. I just want to use my manual screwdriver here and verify that these are the right screws for the standoffs. The count adds up. Let's see. Yeah, it's tightening down, so I guess we're going to be okay. Just barely. I guess what I'm trying to say is this doesn't feel like a just barely kind of a case. There's a lot of those for sale, a lot of cheap, flimsy hot dog cases, if you will. I call them hot dog cases because they might look good, but you don't want to see how they're made. The Be Quiet case is a strong, sturdy, well-built case. So why go cheap with the drive cages? Why go cheap with the lack of standoffs or spare screws? That when you have an overabundance, you have more than you need with the case design, is more than most people will ever use. Why would you not give them an extra set, more screws and standoffs than they would ever use? You know, keep that theme. And it's very inexpensive to include that stuff. I'm turning these by hand because I'm still not certain that these are the fine threads sockets, because they're kind of fitting in loose, but they are tightening up. Stan Aristov with £4.99 in Super Chat says, hey, Carey and chat from Kent in the UK. I got to work tomorrow, so I'll watch the repeat. Have a good day, evening, and day, depending on where you're at. Cheers. Well, cheers, Stan. Thank you for supporting the channel. Get some rest. And we'll see you in the chat next time, I hope. I will say, this is a big motherboard, and it doesn't look big in this case. Martin Erickson says the case uses the coarse thread motherboard screws, and there are 13 of them according to the manual. Well, that's interesting because these are tightening. You know, we ran into this the other day as well, where the coarse threaded screws also tighten. Let me just try the coarse threaded screws because these do feel a little off to me. But that's really bizarre that they're using case screws or motherboard mounting screws. It's not common. I've seen others do it, but it's just not commonly done. Let's try. Sometimes it can be hard to tell if something's a fine thread or coarse thread, where, you know, you can turn them and they both will turn and tighten. So whatever the biggest thread is that tightens is the one you should use. So let me take one of these out and try the coarse thread and see if that works. It does work. It's fascinating to me. That's like twice in a row I've been through that. Normally, if you put a fine threaded screw into a coarse threaded socket, it just won't tighten, or it won't go in straight. It'll be crooked. But these are coming out just fine. And that's the other thing. If the thread's the wrong thread, it might go in, but it'll just spin coming out. It won't actually raise up. But these, I'll be gosh darn, it absolutely wants the coarse threads. I appreciate that information from Martin Erickson. You are correct. Once again, I really believe they could do better by labeling these bags. Some other case manufacturers, it'll say HDD screws. It'll say motherboard screws or mounting screws. These bags, all the bags have no writing on them. And I'm disappointed that Be Quiet doesn't do what less respected brands, I'll say that, are going above and beyond than Be Quiet is in that regard. If I've been doing this for over 30 years and it's confusing me, what is the average home user supposed to do, especially if that's the market you're aiming this case towards? Now, that's no detriment with regards to the usability, design, well, not design, but the usability and the build quality of the case. There's nothing for me to nitpick about in that regard. It is one of the better built cases I've ever worked with. Oh, now this one's not coming out. All right, there it goes. Thankfully, the magnet has lifted it out. That's my first indication that that was not the right screw. The fact that those did tighten down, looks like they have a similar red pitch to them if that's able to tighten down like that. Very strange. But let me pick this up now. You can see what this looks like with the motherboard in it. Given it's a black case and a black board with that big black cooler, it's kind of stealthy. Brian says we're live, so there's room for bloopers. Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting that people want to have different rules for an interactive video than they would for any other interaction in their life. Anytime you interact with somebody, it's live and unscripted and unrehearsed. I'm trying to replicate that experience. I'm not trying to be some polished, edited commercial. So real life is going to have the pauses and mistakes or misspoken words that happen in conversation that we all have whenever we converse. We all don't usually write out a speech, memorize it, or read it from a teleprompter and redo it over and over and over until we do it just right. That's not real life. None of us live life like that. So that's all I'm trying to replicate here is reality. In fact, I'm not trying to replicate reality. I'm trying to demonstrate reality. Let's see. That giant cooler looks small in there, says Smiley Matt. Yeah, everything looks kind of small in this case, comparatively speaking. But I think, putting a 360 all-in-one radiator up here instead of that giant cooler, because this is a glass panel, it'll look a lot better. We have plenty of room. Now, I would also prefer to use a Be Quiet power supply and a Be Quiet cooler in this Be Quiet case and just kind of do a Be Quiet build. But I don't have any right now. So I'm going to make do with what I have. And in that regard, I have a giant power supply. I've had it many, many years, and I've never had any use for it because it's a big HX1200i power supply from Corsair. This thing is much, much bigger, much longer than a typical power supply. And I expect that this case will swallow this up effortlessly. So remember, we've got that bracket we can put on here. This bracket right here. And then these are a little dusty because I've had it a while. This motherboard wants two 8-pin CPU power connectors, but do we have two? What do we have? This is SATA. This is CPU. This, what is this? This is graphics. Seem to be one short. I think we can power this up with just one of the 8-pin EPS power connectors. Guess we're going to find out if it's necessary or not to have them both. But I'll tell you something else that's nice about this case is how much room I have between the top of the heatsink and the top of the case. I can get my hand in there to reach that connector easily. So I can come over here, and I'm not sure if you're supposed to use one over the other. I'll start with the one at the far edge here. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to get to that. Give me just a second here. I need like a flashlight or something. Shine that through there, that'll help. There's some writing on the board over each of these plugs. Oh, it just says ATX 12 V1 and V2. On V1. Now, if we go to turn the system on and it won't boot, that means I need to have another EPS power connector, which this power supply can accommodate, but it looks like I may have misplaced the cables. Yeah, it looks like this was used in another build that was pulled from. I think somebody sent me a computer in for repair and said I could keep the power supply, and maybe why I don't have all the cables, because these were the cables that were in use. So now the motherboard power cable, will snap that on. Then we'll run it right through here. So slack. Okay. When you order a power supply, you've got to make sure you get a power supply that's going to have long enough cables. Because if you potentially have anything that requires power towards the upper far corner from where the power supply is, there are many power supplies on the market where that's not going to reach. So one of the downsides, or one of the awarenesses that you need of ordering a larger than normal case. What's interesting is Be Quiet refers to this as a MIDI case. I've never heard that term before either. We typically have full towers and mid towers. I've never heard of a MIDI tower. MIDI usually refers to music, like MIDI interfaces. So once again, it's a terminology Be Quiet is using that I've never heard in reference to a computer case before. And it may be that it's just a less commonly used term, or they're just misusing the term. I'm not sure, but I found that very confusing when we were titling the video, that this was a MIDI tower when I was certain it was a typo and was supposed to say mid tower. I'd like to know where the word MIDI comes from in regard to the referencing the size of the case. Does it stand for something? I am not familiar with the term MIDI outside of music, reference to music. All right, let's see. Grab a screwdriver here. And we need 4 more of these motherboard screws, right? These are the same screws we use to mount the motherboard that we're going to use to mount the power supply. Normally, I would use the screws that came with the power supply, but this is a used power supply that we're recycling here, repurposing. You don't want to tighten these down, just get the screws started so that everything will align. Much easier. Unless you like to frustrate yourself, in which case go ahead and tighten each screw down individually and then struggle with getting the rest of them in. All right, so we get all those started. Now this is a very large and heavy power supply, and just having these fairly shallow screws, oops, I didn't mean to put that there. We don't go to this top left. We go about 1 inch inward on one corner. It will be here if you're mounting the power supply with the fan down, and it'll be down here if you're mounting the power supply with the fan up. But that one corner is in about 1 inch away from the corner, whereas all the other screws are properly in the corner. And once again, on the same, if it's the top or the bottom where you're going 1 inch in, then you're also going to go a little bit down on this one. So this one's not exactly in the corner either. 2 bottom ones are. I've seen people put 2 screws. Only 1 screw per corner, please. Now, before I tighten the power supply in, I want to see if I can get a good look in there to get these 2 cables plugged in. So our EPS, oh, I've broken the clip off. Okay. Another reason to replace this power supply with something else. Ref reel, CPU. Okay, so it looks like we can go here and here maybe. All right, so that's just motherboard power. We're going to need SATA power for the LEDs, so I might as well hook that up while I'm in there now. So this, I don't intend to keep the power supply in there. This is just makeshift so we can do the video today. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. Here, plug our RGB in. And with that, now we can put the supply in. Once again, I'm just going to start these screws. Once they're all started, then we'll go around and tighten them. That way, if there's any adjustment that needs to be made for the screws to align with the holes behind them, it's much easier to do when everything's loose. All right, so we have our front port umbilicals to hook up, and then we can test fire it. Now, this should already be prepped with the operating system installed and activated and updated, at least within reason, depending on how long it's been since I last updated it. And let's see, we've got our front port audio cable that usually needs to go somewhere. Somewhere in this bottom right corner in most cases. Where is my flashlight? I need a flashlight to find my flashlight. Yeah. So a nice cable cutout here in the case, which is perfect for hiding those cables that are going to run the length of the motherboard from behind. A lot of cases only give you cable holes, cable management holes like right up here, when you have to run this audio cable visibly across the front of the board. So I like that there's this giant cable management slot here so we can hide everything nice and tidy, keep it nice and clean. We have a number of fan headers on this board, so we can plug in, let's see, we've got a rear case fan, plug that in. Well, here's a test. Let's see how long this rear case fan cable is, because in order to hide this, I would need to run this rear case fan cable right out through this corner, right back here. If I can reach, let's see. Yeah, that is not gonna work. Not gonna work. Why is there another fan cable here? What's it say? Oh, for the top fan. Okay. So essentially, this board, along with many others, has fan headers along the bottom of the board. And to hide this cable, I would need to bring it down. And Be Quiet has not included a cable long enough for us to do that. Now, if I rotate the fan 90 degrees, you can see that for some reason they've got the cable coming out towards this side of the case instead of towards the rear, which to me is improper fan installation. That's going to give us maybe 4 more inches of cable. Oh man, that's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be enough. But let's go ahead and move this just to see. I'm not quite sure why they would have mounted it that way. It doesn't make any sense to me, because it also shows this label is sideways. When I rotate it so that the cable's going to be coming out of this corner instead of that corner, not only will it give us more cable, but this label will be upright. So maybe an OCD thing, I understand. However, if I was the manufacturer, I would want my cable, my label rather, to be legible, upright, and proper as it should be. If I intended it to be mounted this way, then I would have rotated that label accordingly. So this suggests to me it was not oriented in the optimum position for those 2 reasons, the most important being how it's affecting our cable length. So if I'm looking at some cheap case manufacturer from China, I expect this, but I expect better thoughts going through the reasoning, going through what rotation they're choosing and which fan they're choosing, because they make a number of different types of fans. Be Quiet does. So if we were to put this in this way, right, so that the writing is facing up, it makes no difference on the cooling. It doesn't do anything bad. There's no downside to turning it 90 degrees. So what in the world were they thinking when they brought the cable out towards the glass window. I mean, that's the last place you want to run your cables, is towards your glass window where everybody can see. It's a minor nitpick, but what good reason would they have? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what justification, or is there any justification behind that orientation? I don't think there is. I don't really think it's really thought of at that level. Because if it was, I believe it would have been done this way. This should be the default position for all rear case fans. Take a look at any Corsair case and look at the orientation of the rear case fan. You'll see what I'm talking about. Look at the NZXT cases as well. Look at other manufacturers. So Be Quiet sometimes feels the need to do things differently, but not necessarily for any particular benefit. If anything, it's the opposite of a benefit. It's making me do work I wouldn't have to do with other manufacturers' cases. It's not hard work, but imagine you're working for a living doing this, and you've got to get through 10 of these today. And you've got to do this 10 separate times. You're probably not going to get them all done because of the added time this is adding to your build. So if you're just building one time, you know, who cares? But that's why I share my perspective as a system builder, as a professional. Time is money. And customers are fickle and impatient. And the more jobs I can get done in a day, the more money I can make and the more people I can help. Okay, so now, I think we're still going to be about 1 inch too short. Yeah. Yeah, we are just shy. 1 more inch is all we needed, and we're not going to get there. Now, there are fan extension cables we can use. Would have been nice if a case of this size came with a fan extension cable, or a fan splitter cable even, would double up as a fan extension cable. That would have been well thought, because you've got these 2 fans right back here, which are likely going to be the furthest away from the fan headers of any other fan in your entire system. Now, they do sell other variations of this case with an ARGB fan controller, which I'm assuming, oh, now look at that. That one looks like it might actually reach. No, that one's going to be another inch too. It's just, what a shame. What a shame. Their own fans don't fit their own cases in the sense of their cabling. Cables are, they need to be 2 inches longer. 1 inch would be tight. 2 inches would give us a little slack. So whatever length, Be Quiet, whatever length of cable you're using on these fans, my recommendation is 2 more inches, or whatever that is in metric. So what I'm going to have to do is use a fan splitter, join these together, and then that fan splitter will give us the extra couple inches we need to plug onto the board. Now, generally speaking, this is going to be another nitpick on this case. If you've got a rear case fan, you do not need a top exhaust fan. You need one or the other, but if you run your benchmarks on testing for heat, and you test without your top fan, as long as the rear fan is running, you likely will see absolute 0 difference in temperatures. Your temperature won't go up and your temperature won't go down. That top fan, in theory, does nothing. If anything, it could impede the airflow, because we've got 3 fans. We've got the fan up front blowing air in. We've got the fan on the cooler blowing air through the cooler, and then the fan out back blowing air out the back. So we have, if you could see the air, it's going in like this, going straight out. The minute you add this top fan, you disrupt your airflow. So in my opinion, the top fan needs to come out, or the rear fan needs to come out. To have them both, I think this fan would be better served up front. This is doing nothing here. Absolutely nothing. And if you don't believe me, try your own tests and you'll see for yourself. If you have a rear fan exhausting air, then having a top fan exhausting air, if anything, might be worsening your cooler. So again, I have design issues with a lot of things Be Quiet does that doesn't seem to be done for any good reason. That makes no sense to me. So I'm going to take that fan out. And they're good fans. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the fans. It's just a terrible location. If we had no rear case fan, then I would put this fan in. One or the other. The only exception would be if we're putting a radiator up here. But of course, the radiator needs its own dedicated fans. And if we're going to do that, then in theory, we can remove the rear case fan and again, have absolutely zero impact on cooling. Won't run hotter, won't run cooler. It'll run exactly the same. Suggest, if you're skeptical, unplug your top fan. You don't have to take it out, just unplug it and run your heat tests, and you'll see what I'm telling you. As long as you've got a rear case fan running, you don't need a top fan. It could be actually causing your system to run hotter. That's coming out. So again, let's say I'm supposed to build 10 of these today. My boss says I need these 10 built today. I have to do all this extra work on this case I don't have to do on other cases. This is making my job take longer, and nobody's going to be happy about it. Avery said he got my Go Faster stickers today. Hey, right on, Avery. So I would use this fan. I'd put it down here. That's what I would do. And these screws, they have to go in from this side. So I'm going to do this. Step around here. Once again, I want the label facing upright, which they've done correctly here in the front. Just start one of these screws here. And I need another case fan screw. So I can get the two top screws from inside the chassis here and the two bottom screws. Because the power supply shroud is in the way, we have to come in and kind of work in a confined space. Yeah, this is how I would have defaulted this case out of the box. Now I have tightened those too tight. Need to loosen them so I have some little bit of wiggling room here. These last two screws started. Ah, that's much better. There's one. And this will be the fun one because now I've got to go all the way deep inside into the dark shroud here and try and find where the screw goes. Something you just kind of feel for, I guess. Looks like I've got it. That wasn't too terrible. But you can see that Because this power supply shroud is not removable, it's making this difficult. If we could take the shroud out, if this could unscrew and take out, this would have been so much easier. So another suggestion there for improvement is replace the rivets with screws. Got to be held in with something anyway, right? So instead of these being rivets, these should be screws, in my opinion. Shroud for the power supply should be removable, once again, on a case of this caliber, in my opinion. Now these two fans, or two front fans, those can be wired right up into the fan headers of the motherboard right here. Let's see, here. And we've got one here. And then we have one here, and here, and here. And that's it. Sometimes some motherboards, oh no, there is a CPU fan right here, which is to me a terrible location because look how ugly it is. If we run this fan to this header right here, I've noticed a lot of motherboards lately are not coming with this particular fan header that's right underneath the heatsink. And I'm okay with that because it's near impossible to hide this wire now. I prefer the wire to run behind and then come up through the bottom here. So that's the two fans. Now let me just hook up that third one. And that's somewhere. See, they've got it all entwined with this. I like that Be Quiet has given us these Velcro ties for cable management. That's a nice touch. It's again, not just going to point out the things I don't like. I'm pointing out the things I do like as well. Oh, this is the cable hider piece here where that locks in. Kind of curious what that was for. So we'll bring that up and we'll plug that one into the next available fan header, which appears to be right here. Okay, so that's our 3 case fans, and we can continue on with the rest of our front port umbilicals. We've got a USB 3.1 header here. Does this board have that? It does. And in order for me to utilize this, maybe it'll fit without me taking it out of that cable management there. That'll save me some time. That's just a friction fit. You'll hear it and feel it when it clicks into place. Though I don't like that I am sort of woven between these two cables here. So separate them. There it is. It's just something I don't want to deal with later. So take care of that now. And then back around. What else do we have? Power for the RGB. Just tuck that in there for now. This is our ARGB header that can go onto the board. This is our power switch and power LED. So we can route that up under here. And on this motherboard, I believe it's this header right here that we want. Let's see. It's this header right there. So power LED will go on the first two pins on the top rung, starting from the left. Power switch will go on those next two pins right beside. Only putting these on horizontally. These do not go on vertically. They go level. They do not go up and down. Do not connect two rows of pins together. Okay. And then we're almost done. USB 3 header. Now I want to route that away from this power cables. Right here. Okay, so our fans are hooked up. Front port audio, front port switch and LED. We do have an ARGB header right up here. I guess I could plug it in. I also have one down here. Let's try that ARGB. Let's see if that will reach. Right up under there. And right there. Then the RGB can be controlled by the motherboard software, not just by that switch. There we go. So with that, I think we're ready to plug it in and turn it on. So in the network. Set the heavy panels on my network cable. That's not good. And HDMI, we're going to use onboard video. This is an Intel 10900K CPU. Power, it's next. Switch to on. I think this motherboard has some RGB. Yeah, motherboard does have some RGB on there. And all the parts for this build are located in the video description below this video. And then I just need a keyboard and mouse, and we can turn this bad boy on. I can put this back up here now since we've removed that. It wasn't exhaust fan, right? I wasn't paying attention. Doesn't matter, the fan's out of there. And then keyboard and mouse. Keyboard and mouse, okay. Plug into one of these front port USBs just to test them at the same time. So this, if our keyboard and mouse doesn't work, that suggests I have not hooked that up correctly. I'm sure everything is hooked up correctly and will fire up properly the first time, unless I have a bad power supply. That power supply is old, it's been sitting around a while, but sitting around doesn't necessarily make it go bad. Let's put myself in a corner and turn on the HDMI input. Let's go here. And power. So there's an LED around the power button that turns on. I hear nothing, but I see the system is posted. And these fans are perfectly silent. I don't hear the CPU fan. I do not hear the power supply fan. I do not hear the 3 case fans. I mean, they are dead silent, but they're all turning. Okay, off to a good start. So just to go over the specifications of this system, right click, go to System, and we'll verify it. 10900K is the CPU. We have 32 gigs of RAM. That's 16 gigs each, 2 sticks. Windows 10 Pro. This should be activated. Windows is activated. If we look in the device manager, under networking, network adapters, you'll see this has Wi-Fi built into this board. It's an Intel i219V network adapter and a Realtek 2.5 network adapter, along with the Intel Wi-Fi 6E AX210 wireless adapter with Bluetooth. It's a pretty high-end motherboard. It certainly was when I built it. And then we'll just check for any updates we might be missing to Windows 10. And let's see what you guys are saying in the chat room, since I've been focused here on this. This thing is dead silent. Like, it sounds like it's off, literally making no sound at all. Those are some really quiet fans. Carol N contributes £5. Says, I really hate the fact that modern cases don't have optical drive bays at the front. It winds me up. My last case that had this was a CM Storm. Yeah, you won't find 8-track players in them either. You can buy external DVD drives if you still want to. I mean, nobody, generally speaking, everybody's streaming. Everybody wants HD. DVDs are not HD. It's sort of like being back in the 90s again. People aren't buying them, so case manufacturers aren't building what people aren't buying. But the good news is there are still some cases out there that will have one slot, but they are fading away. And like I said, trying to find one these days is a bit like trying to find one with an 8-track player. At some point you go, well, that's ridiculous. Yes, well, that's how a lot of people feel about a DVD player. So the world changes and moves on. You don't have to change with the rest of the world, but the world will not wait for you. And if you want to hold on to this old obsolete technology, and let's face it, DVDs are obsolete now. If you want to hold on to that, it's your freedom and your choice to do so. But because it's what most people are not doing, manufacturers aren't going to accommodate you anymore. They did accommodate you during, DVD's heyday, but it's long since passed. In fact, Netflix isn't even sending out DVDs anymore. So the good news is you can always buy an external DVD that plugs into USB. So it's really not a big deal. And of course, there's still a handful of cases out there that have the slots for adding DVDs, but they're going away. Another couple of years, they'll be gone entirely. And as they should be, just like 8-track players. Download and install that download. Alan Lindos was $7.77. He says, I'm 2 hours late. Seems like I should double my typical late fee. He says, hello, Carey, Marlena, and chat. Welcome in. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. And thank you also to Carol N for your contribution. Avery Ramsdorf contributed $1. Thank you, Avery. I think I got money. Hortot said, these live streams make me want to build a computer that I don't need. I like that case. Yeah, it's very roomy. There's a lot of options for expansion in a case like this, for sure. I think it looks funny without a third fan there, though. But That's easily remedied. They do sell a version of this case with 3 case fans up front. Sergio Coach, it says, since I got my 200R case and new setup 3 years ago, I bought an external USB DVD player just in case. And guess what? I've never used it. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're being used less and less. New motherboards don't come with DVDs on drivers anymore. Drivers on DVDs is what I meant to say. So everything's downloading now. You go on the website, you stream your movies, you get better quality. Yeah. Morton agrees it needs a 3rd fan. Well, the good news is they do manufacture and sell fans. That's what they're really known for. Hence the name Be Quiet. We just need to make sure we get the same family because they have pure wings and light wings. And so, you know, they have weird names like they're Pure Rock that don't necessarily make any sense. And when I've asked them to explain it to me, they even had a hard time explaining it to me. So anyway, no big deal. We'll easily be able to pick up another fan. They're not expensive. They're not hard to find. Are the fans RGB? No, the fans are not RGB. There is an RGB version of this case, but that's not what we have. We do have some RGB on this case, and that's going to be on the front. When I plug the front back in, if I go back to, since we're waiting on this to download, let's go back full screen on camera 1. And if I step around here, if you recall in the beginning of the video how I took this off, this goes right back on, closes like that. And then this is our front panel here. Got some protective tape here, which we'll peel off. This is just going to snap on. And when it does, it's going to make an electrical connection, and you'll see the RGB on this piece will light up. Or not. Why is our RGB not lighting up? Lit up for a second. It's got RGB right just through here. It's very subtle. But they do sell a different version of this case if you want more in-your-face RGB, like RGB fans. Where is it because I plugged into the motherboard header? Plug that. No. Leave that cable unplugged just in case. Let me step around here. Let's step around and make sure I didn't accidentally unplug anything. No, that looks good. Well, that's puzzling. Let's go back over to see what our progress is here. We'll wait for this to finish. Thought that was going to light up as soon as I attached it. I am going to shut this down. And then we'll go back over to camera 1 again. Maybe it just didn't like the shock of me attaching it while it was on. Should be lighting up. What am I missing? These pins attached to these pads that should be delivering voltage to our RGB. Let me go back to input so I can see what the screen says. We'll go full screen and back over to those updates that it was working on. Let that work. So when I attached the front bezel, it did light up for just a second and then it stopped. So something ain't right. Let's put myself back in a corner here. So that's pretty much the build in the Shadowbase 800DX case from Be Quiet. Pros and cons. With regard to the RGB not working, that's got me a little bit thrown because that's a pretty straightforward connection. It's just using power right off of the power supply for that. It suggests to me that something's not making a connection correctly. I don't know why. Everything looks okay here. I wonder if it's possible that this power cable I'm using on this power supply isn't the right one. The only way I would be able to determine that would be to grab a different power supply entirely and plug it straight onto another power supply. So I'll just grab this power supply right here and we'll use one of its SATA connections. SATA power connection. We'll plug the RGB for the motherboard, for the case rather. Let's see. Loosen these cables up. Grab a SATA cable. There we go. Set a power connection. And let me grab the RGB power connection here. And then I need another power cable. Let me check my email. Frankie B sends an Amazon gift card of $50. Hey, thank you, Frankie B. All right, so I need a power cable to go here. Oh, and I need to force this power supply on. So sometimes when you buy a power supply, they come with these. They're like for priming pumps on liquid coolers. This will force the power supply to turn on. So we'll plug that in. All I have to do is give it power. So I just need a power cable, which is right here. I'll just use this one. And we'll plug in down here. Actually, I'll plug in up here. Plug this in here. Plug this in here. This will tell me if it's my power supply cable, if I've got the wrong one. Step around. No. Lights are not working. So I'm missing a step somewhere to get this RGB on. This is not a power supply issue, which I thought it was. That isn't going to solve it. Something else is happening here where there's no connection. We should be getting some RGB right along the edges. It's pretty mild RGB, so I'm surprised that's not working. All right. Okay, so I think that's going to wrap it up for today's video. We're gone on about 2 hours and 20 minutes. So it's about 20 minutes over what I like to do. And this is just downloading some updates here. But overall, you know, it's a big case. It's well built. I find it has a couple of shortcomings, things that I think could have made it better, in my opinion, which we've gone over. I won't go over again. And I'll have to look into what's going on with the front RGB. One of the reasons I don't like RGB is this is a diagnostic that doesn't make me any money. And it's not typically something a customer will pay for, but will call under warranty to have fixed. It has nothing to do with the computer, at least not as far as performance, reliability, or security. It's just there for lights. You can just go buy some lights. So one of my frustrations is when you're working, you know, doing this for a living, that you can spend a lot of in-warranty labor that's coming out of business owner's pocket to address any support questions or issues strictly dealing with RGB lighting. And it drives me insane because I'm typically used to getting support calls where a business is in trouble. They're unable to perform work or help their customers, and the work is important. RGB work is not important. And it's hard for me to get excited to get over to a customer's to fix an RGB problem because it doesn't have any impact on anything. So This is a primary reason right here. And if it doesn't cause a problem right away, it eventually does. Something down the line will create a problem for you that you'll end up realizing maybe the RGB software needs to be updated, isn't compatible with the latest Windows update, causing your system to crash, and it's having some real negative effect just because you wanted some lights. So now I will spend some time diagnosing this, which if it didn't have RGB, I'd be done. But I do like how they've implemented the RGB on the Shadow 800 DX case. It's subtle. It's there on the edges. I wish I could show it to you. Something's not working right with it, so I'll have to look into that. Are the front fans connected to the system fan headers? If you've missed any of that, just rewind this video. You can really, I have shown everything as I've done it. All the fans are plugged into the motherboard. Loviator says the DVD drive is useful for burning MP3s from CDs. Again, if this was the 90s, maybe even the early 2000s, but why would I waste my time doing that? I'm not aware of any CD player that will play DVDs. And I'm not aware of any cars. Well, I suppose there's some cars out there that will have a DVD player. And there's some cars out there that may have a cassette deck too. But with music streaming services like YouTube's music platform, Pandora, Spotify, you can have over 7 million songs at the press of a button play instantly as soon as you touch the button. Having your own music library and hoarding that yourself and paying for all the DVDs and paying all that labor and time and going through and categorizing and tagging, you know, that was something we did 20 years ago. I couldn't imagine going back to that. So, but to each his own. Like I said, some people want to stay in the past. That's where they're comfortable. The world isn't staying in the past with you. They are going to leave you behind. So, you know, to each his own. That's the beauty of PCs, is if you're somebody that still wants to use old, outdated technology, you can still build a PC to run Windows 98 if you wanted to. Their parts are out there. Old, obsolete parts are being sold for pennies on the dollar at places like eBay and Facebook Marketplace, if that's what you want to do. It doesn't represent what the majority is doing. And as a result, manufacturers are responding accordingly. Car radios come with USB ports for MP3 files. Typically, USB ports are designed to plug in phones. Some of them will also run MP3 files, but generally speaking, it's there for a phone. When consumers are buying a car, they're not looking for a USB port for plugging in a flash drive. They're looking for a USB port to plug in their phone, just so we're clear. So, while some people may choose to use a USB port to play MP3 files, they represent a very small fraction. And of those who are doing it, likely you will not be doing that in 10 more years. That will all but be just done. But there'll always be somebody out there who still wants to hold on to the past. And you have every right to do that if you want to. It's just not a choice most people make. Not anymore. All right, I'm just looking to see if there's any final questions. Paul wants to know if there's a sticker over the panel connector. No, there's no sticker. Any stickers would be external. They won't put stickers on internally. See any other questions? USB is much used for media playback. Through a smartphone in most cases, media playback through a smartphone. People aren't generally using flash drives for media playback anymore. I realize most of you watching the video don't represent the general population. I do try to make my videos appealing to the general population, not to the niche enthusiasts who aren't like the average consumer and are using equipment in a more technical manner than the average person. So yes, well, some of you may still apparently be holding on to that. It is not representative of how the consumer is using it in general. And likely that is something that's fading away. So, you know, enjoy it. I'm not telling you not to. I'm just saying the world's going to continue changing and it's not going to accommodate you. So the sooner you get on board with, you know, being able to stream your music using, like I like being able to, you know, have the radio. If I hear a song and I want to know what that song is, I hit Shazam. It tells me what it is. I push a button. It adds it to my Spotify playlist. It costs me nothing. I have my music everywhere I go. I don't have to take a flash drive out and update it. I don't have to worry about running out of space or limits to the number of files allowed in a folder. There are so many advantages to streaming that to me, it'd be like you want to use a push lawnmower and I've got a riding lawnmower. And you can say, I've been using this push lawnmower for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. I wouldn't have an electric a riding lawnmower. Well, to each his own. But trying to find a push lawnmower, your choices are pretty limited. Nobody, the general population doesn't want those anymore. But some people still do. But eventually, there may come a day where there's just not enough people interested that it makes sense to manufacture them. So with all things, you know, a lot of people aren't buying horseshoes anymore either. Some people still do. Gregory Howard with $25 in Super Chat says, hey, I like your making pizza video. Check your PayPal. Thank you, Gregory. Yeah, we'll check PayPal or check email here one time before we go, and then we'll wrap things up. Oh, Gregory Howard says $100 to via PayPal. Well, thank you, Gregory. I know that you, Gregory, you had mentioned some interest in that little machine I'm building, the little coffee maker. Do reach out to me through my email if you want to discuss that, if you're serious about it. We can talk about that privately. And thank you so much for your generosity and your support. A shout out once again to everybody who's contributed during today's live stream, and that includes, first of all, I can go ahead and restart this. Let's restart this, and then let's go full screen on camera 1. Maybe I need to move this so you can see me. So a shout out and a thank you to Gregory Howard, Alan Lindas, Carol N., Stan Ristov, Planet Cryos, Paul O'Brien. Thank you to Avery Ramstorff and Michael Dane for extending their memberships. Thank you for the contributions from Mark Gaines, Roy Starman, and Gregory Howard again, and Paul O'Brien. So again, thanks to you guys for supporting the channel. And also, I'll check the Amazon gift cards. One more shout out again for those contributions. And that includes Frankie B. Thank you for the Amazon gift card. And of course, Gregory Howard, Paul O'Brien, and Mark Gaines with Amazon gift cards, as well as the super chats. You guys rock. I think that will wrap it up. So, thanks to the folks at Be Quiet for sending us the case for review. I appreciate that they value my input, and do know that there are varying, numerous versions. There's 3 different versions of this case, with RGB, without RGB, in black or in white. and the link is in the video description below this video. I want to remind you that if you ever need data recovery services, if you have a failed hard drive, there is no cheaper and no higher rated service other than $300 data recovery. Check them out at 300ddr.com. Be sure and do your research before sending a drive that has critical data on it. Don't just send that to the cheapest place or try and restore it yourself, because if you fail at it or the cheap place fails at it, it may make what was once recoverable totally unrecoverable. So if you're serious about it and you want to save money and save time, do your research, look up the data, the feedback on $300 data recovery, the highest rated data recovery service on Yelp on the planet. They've been around since 2007. We've got some interviews with them we've done a few years ago. And anybody that's ever worked with them that I've ever talked to has nothing but glowing things to say. So if you've been holding off, maybe you've got a drive or some media that's been damaged, never been a better time than now to get that before prices go up. Also, if you're looking for Windows or Office product keys, the folks over at VIP CDK Deals, they're giving you my discount, essentially. I'm paying exactly what you guys pay. If you buy your product key from them and use the code word or coupon code CAREY, C-A-R-E-Y, you're getting 30% off what is already a discounted price. That's giving you my pricing. If you are going to buy a product key, I strongly recommend you use it within 30 days, only because if you experience a problem, you'll have no issue with customer service. When you go beyond 30 days, like trying to return something to Best Buy after 30 days, they might still take it back, but you're probably going to have to get a manager involved, and the whole thing comes across very suspicious. So in most events, you're going to buy the product key, it's going to work. But if you buy the product key and then you don't use it for 6 months, and then you go to use it and find out it's got an issue, I'm not saying you're not going to get customer support, but it certainly comes off as very like you're trying to pull a scam. So they've got to get past that and may be a little more difficult. So I recommend don't buy product keys until you need them. Once you activate a Windows product key, it stays tied to that motherboard forever, forever, Windows 10 or Windows 11. You'll never need to use that product key on that board if you ever do a reinstall. It'll automatically reapply that product key and reactivate itself, unless you have successfully reused that product key, which shouldn't work after the first activation. But if it does, it disables the previous activation, which means the next time you need to install it, it will no longer reassign that product key again. So you're only robbing yourself if you think you're getting away with something. They do have product keys that are discounted that you can install on 2 systems. In other words, one product key that can be activated on 2 entirely different systems. And you don't save much, but you get a little bit of a discount if you want that. And of course, there's RoboForm. If you're looking for some password management, nothing beats RoboForm. Everybody who's new to RoboForm gets 30% off their subscription for new customers only. And the link for that is in the video description below the video. Thank you to Camera Girl for today's thumbnail. And thank you guys for joining me. That'll wrap it up for me for today. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Until next time, bye for now.